think we can get going.
We're good to go?
Yeah.
Cool. I'm here for it.
Alex, well, it is my absolute pleasure to have Alex Williams here as our second guest today in the Earth Talks for On Earth Hartford. Just to introduce you a little bit to our audience, Alex is an environmentalist who is the founder, one of the founders, right, of Blue Earth Compost. Owner and operator of Blue Earth Compost. FundStat has diverted over 67 million pounds of organic materials from landfills since Blue Earth was first started. Alex has really built Blue Earth from kind of a home-based operation into a pretty incredible presence based here in Hartford, but now with kind of a statewide reach. And so we're going to get more into that. Alex is known for passion for sustainability, community involvement, and innovation in waste management practices. So really happy to be here with you. And yeah, I'm curious just to kind of take the first question, take us back to the beginning of kind of when you first decided to get going with Blue Earth Compost. Was there really a moment when you realized this is the work that you needed to do? What led to this decision to take the leap into starting a business?
Yeah, definitely. So I went to school in the city at Fordham, and I was an environmental studies major there. So I was always interested in topics that surrounded environmentalism. I had a couple internships junior, senior year, and one of them specifically was for an organization called Build It Green, and they had several composting facilities and collection points throughout the boroughs, the main one being in Queens. So I would travel all the way out there and do the collections, do the processing, the whole nine, and I just kind of caught the bug from that experience. The biggest thing that struck me immediately and like continues to this day is the tangible impact that composting makes. Like, it's not nebulous like other forms of recycling. It's really, it's right there in front of you, basically. And I got a lot of experience doing that through those internships. So yeah, that's kind of where the bug came from.
Awesome. Well, and for folks that may be less familiar with composting, can you kind of paint the picture for us of literally just what happens to that banana peel from the time that you throw it into, your I'm curious specifically about the composting process, right?
Yeah.
So what happens, and through Blue Earth's kind of way of doing that?
For sure. So like a general overview of composting, just as like a topic, is it's the man-made process of trying to decompose organic matter like more quickly than it would in nature for the effort of creating a nutrient-rich like soil amendment, which is what we call compost. So you're going to take what we call your greens, which are going to be like your food waste basically, and your browns, which are generally something like leaves, wood chips. You can use newspaper. Basically, that's a carbon source. Your greens are your nitrogen. If you mix those together in the right environment, in a, just call it 3 to 6 month span, you'll get compost out of the back end of that. For us, we're basically the middleman. We fit that niche between like the producer and the processor. So for us specifically, if you use our service, you're going to put your food scrap in one of our collection containers. We're going to pick it up and commingle it with a whole bunch of other food scraps from all over the place. And we'll bring it to a processing facility to do that process that I just explained.
Yeah. So as someone who has dabbled in and out of my own kind of food waste journey and have been a customer of Blue Earth as well, what would you say? I mean, you can do this yourself at home, but what's the difference? Why tell us kind of what's the benefit of using a service like yours?
Yeah, it's a great question. The biggest difference is that we can compost any kind of food scrap at all. So in your backyard pile, you're limited by both the temperature that you can get your pile to, and therefore the kinds of things you can break down, and you're also limited by like smell issues, pest issues, stuff like that. You don't really want like a bunch of raccoons or a bear in your backyard like digging through your compost pile. Yeah, that's the main difference. Is like our saying is, if it grows, it goes. So you can literally take any and all food waste, 100%.
So even your cheeses and meats and
bones,
everything.
Dairy products. We've composted like whole animals before. You can, if it's organic material, it can be composted for sure.
Nice. Yeah, which I can, again, speaking from experience, that's a lot harder to deal with in your backyard,
Very
even
much.
if you got the machine, if
Very
you want
much.
to be able to do that kind of volume.
Yeah.
So
We basically take like that, any of those barriers basically is what our service is designed to remove.
nice, awesome. Anything that you think might surprise people about food waste, composting? What might we not know?
I kind of just answered that question a second ago.
Yeah.
Just like the sheer volume of things is something
Yeah.
that definitely surprises people on a regular basis. It's easy to think about, like a banana peel or a piece of bread or whatever. People have seen those like sort of decomposing right in front of them before, but you can literally compost anything that's made from like an organic material. You can even compost certain kinds of cloth. You can compost hair, literally. Like it just depends on what kind of facility you use and what you're permitted for and stuff like that. Another interesting fact, on more of like a global scale, food waste has been determined by a nonprofit called Project Drawdown, which is a pretty credible source in the space, that if we can solve this issue like globally or try to work towards it, all the food waste that occurs throughout the whole process from growing to disposal after the consumer buys it could have the biggest impact in general on climate change and on reversing the negative impacts of emissions that come from this, more than cars emissions, more than household emissions, the whole nine.
That's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
Well, I want to come back to that, but I actually am just curious to understand a little bit more about how Blue Earth Compost has kind of grown. I think you started with literally a truck and a bucket, and have really built some significant infrastructure and processes. So tell us a little bit more about sort of what's your operation look like now, and I'd love to hear a little bit about as you're scaling up, there's probably new environmental impacts for the way that you're kind of processing stuff, right? You've got more trucks, you've got maybe more emissions. So how do you kind of reconcile those two parts? How are you thinking about your overall impact as you scale?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So, like you said, we started very rudimentary. We had an SUV, buckets, a couple tubs in the back, that kind of style. When I first purchased the company, it was 22 customers, I think was the number, all residential. Now we're much larger, like you said. Thankfully, we've got like 15 plus employees at this point. We've got 11 trucks of different varieties. We've got over 2,000, maybe more like 2,500 customers in total at this point, both commercially and residentially. The operation, again, thankfully has definitely grown quite a bit. In terms of your point, again, the technology we use has increased and changed in a million different ways. We use fully automated dump trucks now to collect most of our waste on the commercial side. So, they're much more efficient. They can hold a lot more material. They're safer for the driver to utilize. They were a great upgrade to the system for sure. But as you said, they do come with like a negative downside. They are big diesel trucks, there's no doubt. The ways we've tried to combat this, not only through just like the general work that we do, obviously, is purchasing newer trucks. We've made that a point to not like have old vehicles on the road, trying to cycle out old ones, move into more new ones. We have been consistently researching the electric truck market as well, which is like starting to progress, thankfully, much more quickly these days, and that is a goal of ours as those technologies become more fully fleshed out to move into that realm when we can do that. And it's more just about like on a day-to-day basis, just being very aware. We purchase a lot of things in bulk. We utilize pressure washers instead of regular hoses to clean our materials, so the water usage is down. We recycle internally, just like regular recycling on a regular basis. So just sort of being aware of our day-to-day operations, I would say, is the biggest way that we keep tabs on this regularly.
Awesome. I would imagine that you probably attract other environmentalists.
We definitely do.
Yeah.
Very
You're
much.
going to care probably no matter what, right?
It's very true, yeah.
Well, so I'm curious, as composting is getting a little bit more mainstream, hopefully a lot more mainstream, and you mentioned, the scale of this is really important from an environmental impact standpoint. Like if we could, get everybody doing this, it's humongous. It's like I can't even state. So what would you say, like, is your hope for kind of how does the community help make that happen? What are some of the ways that you'd like to see more people adopting this, and maybe some of the barriers to that?
Yeah, I will second your point first and foremost. In the time that I've run this business over the last 11 years, the public awareness around composting has grown exponentially from where it was before. So the process has begun, and I don't see that like train stopping anytime soon. On a community level, composting is inherently a like local recycling solution is really how I think about it. You can't ship food waste like overseas to be processed. You know what I mean? It's even difficult to ship it a couple states away because it decomposes very quickly, obviously. So it's inherently a local recycling solution. If we can continue to build out processing infrastructure, you can pick it up in one town, process it in the next town over, and distribute it to the towns around it to be like returned to the soil and begin that process all over again. So there's always a community aspect to it just inherently. In terms of sort of maybe bigger picture things statewide, federally, just more regulation around trying to get it out. The last speaker was talking about bottle bills. There has been a lot of legislation that has been incrementally increased in Connecticut to ban food waste, specifically from commercial producers. We would love to see that continue to move in that direction. The biggest untapped frontier being residential waste. There is very little curbside collection being done on a municipal level in the state right now. So any regulation, any sort of work that the state can do in totality to try to pull that out, it's like that would definitely make a huge impact for sure.
So yeah, making it easier for the curbside thing to happen for
Exactly.
consumers.
Exactly.
Well, until that happens, I'm also just curious because I know you guys use those very distinctive green buckets. You can see them around town. So have you noticed, or kind of do you have any sense of whether there's like the visibility of that maybe helping? You see your neighbors doing something. You're like, how much do you find people are kind of learning through the visibility and word of mouth maybe?
Word of mouth has always been our biggest growth tool by far, both residentially and commercially. Relationship building, people passing that experience on to their neighbor, their family member, a work colleague, a professional colleague. That's 100% been the way that we've grown mostly. So yeah, I'd like to think that the green buckets played a role in that for sure. Our commercial bins are blue with like a bright yellow lid too, so they're somewhat ubiquitous in the more of a commercial environment. But yeah, I'd absolutely just that passing the word along is the best way to do it.
Yeah. Well, and I know too, just shifting gears, because you have some really amazing partnerships with schools, cities, different businesses. So what are some of the most memorable partnerships or projects?
Yeah, it's a great question. I was thinking about this one. I have to point to the town or the city of Middletown, I guess. Wesleyan University was the first RFP that we won 8 years ago now, I want to say. So like right at the nascent phase of our commercial business, they were a big box to check. We were able to utilize that as sort of a jumping off point to be able to grow that side of the business pretty substantially. And now in Middletown specifically, we have a city run program that we've been doing for many years now, where we collect from the majority of the businesses on Main Street, doing the commercial composting for them as well, the restaurants and other food businesses in that district. I would definitely have to point to that one. I like the sort of growth of it and the fact that it, again, was kind of like a touching off point for the commercial side of the business.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, and then, how much have you seen, I guess I'm just curious about the mix of your customers. You said, residential, there's a lot of opportunity, but do you have a pretty good, base now of more business clients, more cities getting on board? Definitely,
yeah. We just announced, I believe it's our 40th municipal partnership. So we work with cities and towns all over the state, transfer station programs, curbside programs, schools is a big one. We work with a lot of K through 12 public education systems to do those programs. Yeah, we have about like 1,700 residential customers. So definitely a good foundation there. And the commercial side of the business has definitely been our biggest growth engine for a while now. That's where we collect the lion's share of the volume that we pick up on a daily basis. It's where we make our biggest impact. It's our biggest economic driver as well. That's definitely taken like over as the bearer of the business for sure over the last couple of years.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, I'm also wondering how, like, I think I'm remembering right that at the end of a season or whatever, you can also get your composted. So I guess, is there more that you're also doing on sort of that end of the spectrum in terms of any of these partnerships, or is there more that you'd like to see happening there? Yeah.
So what you're referencing is our residential program. Included in that fee is a give back of 3 50-pound bags of compost on a yearly basis. Yeah. The customers love this. Yeah. It completes the circle. It also gives them back something that they can use. So it has a tangible impact, kind of like we talked about before. Their food waste goes away. It comes back as compost. And we've also done a bunch and continue to do a lot of donations and also community outreach programs. Like we're giving a bunch of compost in the next couple of weeks to a garden club that's going to utilize it to plant raised beds that all the produce goes to a local food pantry in the town that they're located in. That's just one example I can think of off the top of my head. But yeah, we've always maintained that community aspect. We've always maintained the give back programs. The schools I mentioned that we work with, we've helped them start a lot of school gardens that are in tandem with the composting program, stuff like that. So yeah, it's always been sort of core to the business.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Because I mean, the food space is just like, it's inherently so interconnected and so local. Sorry, as you said. So yeah, it's great to hear some of the examples of that. Awesome. So I'm curious. You're an environmentalist at heart, right? So for folks that are kind of struggling with where to begin, or how can we as individuals make an impact in our lives? Do you have any tips for steps we can take?
Yeah, I'll keep it compost focused just because that's my area of expertise. I mentioned the tangible aspect of it. It's a way that you can make an impact on the environment, a positive impact daily in a small way that adds up over time. Every little bit counts. So I would suggest either looking into backyard options, as we mentioned earlier. There are a million different kinds of backyard composting options, depending on how much time and effort you want to put into it. So research those. A lot of towns will have resources on their websites. The library sometimes does. Sometimes they even will subsidize the actual physical composting unit and whatnot. So that's a good option. And if that is not something that you're willing to do, it doesn't fit your space, you live in an apartment, you just don't have the energy, whatever it might be, look up a local drop-off location, seek out a service like ours, see if that's a possibility. Again, we're located right up in the north end of Hartford. You can bring your food waste to us any day of the week. We'll accept it gladly. It's an easy way to make an impact very quickly.
And so at this point, are you yet available throughout the state? Where is Blue Earth available as a service? Yeah,
for sure. So our residential service is based mainly in Hartford County. Yeah. We have a couple satellite towns down on the shoreline, like Brantford, Guilford, that area. Commercially, we're spread like way far out. So we go all the way from the New York border, like Danbury, all the way down to Greenwich, and we extend all the way to Burlington, Mass, which is like north of Boston. So we're pretty spread out commercially. The core of our business is still Connecticut. We have a decent amount of customers in the Springfield area as well. But yeah, we're spread pretty far and wide at this point.
Yeah, great. And is there, as you think about expansion, are there sort of target areas that you kind of have your eye on, or, and then, well, I'll start with that.
Yeah. I'd say honestly, we're more focused and have been for a while on density building. We've created quite a far-reaching service geographically. A lot of people that will reach out to us at this point now will be able to plug into one of our existing routes, build that density. That lowers the environmental impact of us having to go and collect the food scraps, and it also helps us economically. So that's definitely more our main focus at this point.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, and that kind of brings me to the second question. You sort of implied in the answer, but if Blue Earth isn't available in somebody's town, what would you recommend they do to make that happen? It sounds like maybe talk to your neighbors, get people on board, you know, but
again, there's a lot of towns that we work with that are in, let's call them more of like the rural areas of Connecticut specifically, that have transfer station programs. So that would be the first place that I would look into, is see if your town has a transfer station program that you could bring your food waste to. Great.
And is that with the transfer station, just for, is that the same essential process for folks wanting to know what happens with their food scraps, or are there other processes that can happen? I know there's, biofuels and other things like that. Is that part of the picture in Connecticut much, or?
It very much is. So the transfer station program will function just like any other place. All the food scraps will be collected, and then we'll pick it up again, commingle it, and bring it to a processing facility. So it functions almost identically to our just regular commercial composting service. To your second point about biogas, yes, it's very much a part of the landscape in Connecticut and Western Massachusetts. The facilities are called anaerobic digesters. To make a long story short, they basically function as like a big stomach. They take in the food waste, they process it in an anaerobic environment, so without oxygen, and that produces methane, just like you pump out of the ground, natural gas you'd pump out of the ground, basically. So they can create a renewable energy source from that, and then they can also compost the byproduct as well, so that it's sort of a twofold process, if you will. That's the main facilities that we work with. Mainly because of what is available to us here in Connecticut. They're great partners, thankfully.
Yeah. Great. So I think my big takeaway here is wherever we are in the state, if somebody's watching, there's probably an option there.
Yes.
So you can reach your town, you can, check out Blue Earth Compost and, see if that's an option, which I have to plug again. I've been a customer. You guys are great. So, I think I'm just curious, kind of, it's Earth Day. So, if your food scraps had a voice, what do you think they'd be telling us?
I like this question. I think the back of the truck is like a fun party for the food scrap. Every stop we go, more homies join in. You know what I mean? It's like a big pregame, and then they go to the processing facility, and they're with like all their good friends. They're going to the right spot. They ended up at a good place. You know what I mean? I'd say that they hopefully enjoy the journey for sure. It's much better than going to an incinerator and getting burned alive. Definitely.
That's true. Yeah.
For sure.
Well, I think we may have time for a question if there's anything here in the audience. No
Jeff
biggie.
already knows all the answers.
Jeff knows everything about this.
That's it.
Well, listen, Alex, it's really a pleasure chatting with you again. Just great to hear more about what you guys have been up to and how it's growing, and this the massive amount of impact that is possible. I think certainly speaking for myself, that's not something that I'm you hear about kind of food and agriculture making a real difference, but specifically thinking about food waste as such a huge part of that is pretty powerful. So I appreciate what you guys are doing and hearing all about it. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right.
Is there any more flavor to that study about how the food ecosystem could be the biggest impact place in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, things like that you mentioned earlier? Just I don't know, tell that story a little bit.
Yeah, I think the best way that I could add a little bit more context is people will generally think about food waste personally, like I throw this food waste out because I didn't eat it, or again, it's like a banana peel. But food waste occurs literally from the beginning of the process all the way through, and most of it occurs before it ever gets to a grocery store and it gets to your house or your plate at a restaurant. On the farm, in transportation, in warehousing, in transportation to the final retail location. So just the sheer 40% of food that is produced in America is wasted. It never even gets eaten at all. Hopefully that puts it into context. It's just a sheer volume issue of how much is never actually getting to where it needs to go. At a bare minimum, we could be doing the right thing with that 40% along the way instead of just landfilling it or incinerating it. It produces I guess the last thing I'll say is it produces a very large greenhouse gas emission problem when it is landfilled, which is still the most popular way of disposing of waste in this country, because it again breaks down in an anaerobic environment like I talked about, but it's uncontrolled. All that methane is just going into the atmosphere basically, and it's an extremely potent greenhouse gas, many, many, many times more than CO2. So again, there's a lot of waste along the way that could be dealt with in a lot better way. Cool.
Thanks.
Thank you guys.